So welcome back everyone to another episode of Living with Audacity. I am your host, Aisha. And as always, it is a pleasure to be here with all of you. So I have a really cool topic. Actually, it's another cool topic. I think last episode I was like, oh, I have another great one. No, I feel like every time I come on this podcast, I have another great topic. And today is definitely meeting that criteria. So today on Living with Audacity, this episode, we're going to be talking about owning your identity. Now, something actually I wanted to share, because I don't know if I ever talked about it, but you know, when I say the word like audacity or identity or possibility, I don't know if you've noticed that everything is spelled with a T-E-A. There's an intention behind that because T-E-A stands for taking empowered action. I don't know if I shared that during my first podcast, but I thought I wanted to share it with you. The reason why it's so important is because living with audacity means that we are taking empowered action in aspects of our life. It's actually a mantra that I live by, even prior to starting this podcast, even before thinking about living with audacity. In order for us to achieve the things that we desire, we actually have to take empowered action. It's great to have ideas, dreams, aspirations, but the truth is, what are we doing? Like, what's the verb that we're putting in our sentence around fill in the blank, right? The things we desire actually require movement. They require us to do things. And so that's why I have changed the TY to the TEA, because we're taking empowered action in everything. So when I talk about owning our identity, it means that we're going to take empowered action towards that, what that means when we talk about living with audacity. And so why this is important is because really we live in a world where society loves labels. They love to tell people how to look, how to speak, how to talk, how you're supposed to show up, how you're supposed to dress, like all the things. There's so many like rules and regulations around what it means to show up. And I feel like living with audacity, I mean, certainly, we got to move in alignment. So this is not about going rogue or throwing caution to the wind, but it really is about how do we own our unique identity? How do we ensure that the mantras, the narrative, the assumptions, the expectations around what society says we're supposed to be like, talk like, show up like, dress like, don't overwhelm us, that we stay more focused and committed to understanding, celebrating, showing up as our authentic self, as our unapologetic self, over really trying to shapeshift into these, again, narratives or expectations that say how we're supposed to show up. So today is about owning our identity as another opportunity to live with audacity. And so there's going to be, I'm going to say 3 key T's, because now you're going to hear me use this in every way. 3 key T's that I want to talk about today when we talk about owning our identity. And the first one is about let's just keeping it real about the truth. And as I said, how I kind of started, the truth is society loves labels, okay? We are inundated with all kinds of labels about if you're a woman, if you're a Black woman, if you're a woman of color, if you're a white woman, trans, all of these things. All of these labels are intended to put us in a little box or put us in a box. And within that box is how we're supposed to act, how we're supposed to be, as I said, how we're supposed to speak, how we're supposed to dress, how we're supposed to show up. And the truth is, why? Like, I actually don't want to be like anybody else. I want to be my unique self. I want to be the best version of myself. I want to show up in all of my audacious fabulousness. I want to be able to, take up space how I know I need to. I want to be able to dress how I desire to. I want to be able to speak eloquently, speak openly, speak honestly, speak with assertiveness how I desire to be, and not allow the label of what society dictates or says how I'm supposed to be to take precedent, right? But the truth is, when we talk about owning our identity, is that we are inundated with labels. And why it's so important when we talk about living with audacity to understand what that truth is because we also need to understand how we move away from that, how we shift away from that. As I said, this is not about going rogue and saying screw it to the rules of life, but it really is about owning our own path, right? This is what it means to own our identity. And so for me, there's three really important things when we talk about truth and when we talk about labels that we need to focus on. Number one, labels are limiting. Okay. Now, there was a few shows back where I talked about understanding how we sometimes put people's perspective or their value of us in their hands, right? And one of the things that I talked about was if you allow other people to dictate your value, you might be shortchanging yourself. And I say that because if someone who is thinking about you has a limited mindset, they're not going to see you better than themselves, right? They're not going to see you better than them. Labels are kind of the same thing. Labels create limits. It establishes a way of which you are supposed to stay in this box based on, again, whoever made up these rules, made up these labels of how you're supposed to be. We, in our commitment to self-actualization, self-discovery, self-awareness, self-love, self-care, all the selves require us to spread our wings and start to identify, again, who we are. Right? Again, owning our identity in this audacious space means that we are creating and curating who we are destined to be, who we know we are, and not what society says we need to be or how we're supposed to be. Right? So we need to be really mindful in this truth aspect of owning our identity, that labels actually set limitations, and that oftentimes we will only allow ourselves to exist in this box because it's what the label says. Right? So we got to be really careful with that. Another big one when we talk about truth is that we need to be focused on authenticity over approval. Okay, this was a big, you want to talk about a lesson that I learned in my journey, I would say over the last 10 years. I, at one point in my life, was so focused on approval that I was so far from being authentic that when I look back at myself, I could see that I was not who I was, like my authentic self. It was evident in the way that I dressed. It was evident in the way that I sat. It was evident in the way that I talked. I was so focused on approval and people accepting me that I dishonored my authentic self. Authenticity over approval is fundamental in owning your identity, right? If we are constantly chasing other people's approval, listen, you could be chasing that approval for a long time, for like longer than you should. So be mindful, okay, when it comes to, again, owning your identity. Another one, which is something that I've talked about on many episodes. Again, it's something that I talk about in my coaching business. It's something that I promote. Change and growth must take place in discomfort, okay? Understand that whatever it is that you're seeking in your life, right? This identity that you're now building, and understand our identity changes as we evolve and we grow and we become deeply aware of who we are. It's going to evolve, but growth will never happen in status quo. So as long as you stay safe on this pretty island that you've created for yourself that feels secure and safe, do not expect growth. Discomfort and disruption is where you start to unpack and understand the root of who you are. Like when we talk about building resilience, when we talk about understanding our shadows and our great aspects and our opportunities and our threats, that happens in discomfort. It does not happen in the status quo of life, right? And when you are now owning your identity, when you're getting confirmed and affirmed in who you are, it is happening in those moments of disruption because that's where you're tested, right? It is in those moments of where you're supposed to be this and you are saying, no, I am here or I am that. That happens in disruption. Because when we stay in status quo, what happens is we conform, right? We actually end up living in that box or staying in that status quo or staying within that label that says, again, how we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to talk, how we're supposed to act, how we're supposed to behave. Get comfortable with discomfort because it is in that disruptive state. It is in that discomfort that you really start to understand who you are. Not new. You've heard me say this probably at one point through every episode that you've watched to date. Growth does not happen in status quo. It must happen in discomfort. And I sometimes liken it, like when I even do workshops or one-to-one coaching, I always liken it to this, that we desire in our life to grow, right? If we consider ourselves to be like a plant, right? We know that plants cannot grow in tainted soil. But what we'll try to do is put new soil on top of bad soil, hoping that the plant grows beautifully. right? See all these hand gestures that tell you how things grow. Okay. But in real life, think about how deep the root of a plant goes. The root of a plant doesn't stay in that new level of soil. It goes deep, which means that it has to pass through that tainted soil, which means that the growth that you are expecting to happen is not going to happen because it is trying to push through all that gunk. Okay? Growth, elevation cannot happen in tainted soil. It must happen in new earth, in new soil. That means that we have to undo, unlearn, release ourselves of these narratives, expectations, assumptions that serve us, that do not serve us, and bring in new soil. These are all the new lessons. These are the things that happen in our most uncomfortable space. Okay? That's how we elevate. That's how we grow. So think of it like that. Think of yourself as a beautiful plant that is waiting to be planted in new soil. But in order for that to happen, we got to shovel out all of that old, tainted, negative, no longer serving soil. Okay. So another piece around owning our identity comes from empowerment, right? And when we talk about empowerment is a word that is used like everywhere, right? Empowering, empowered. It's a powerful word, right? But it means that we are here to create an impact. We're here to be an impact, right? But empowerment in owning our identity is another important part of living with audacity. Because again, what we're saying is that this is our opportunity to really demonstrate who we are, right? Think about anybody in your life, maybe even for who you are yourself, right? We desire to make an impact. Think about the most impactful people in your life, right? What have they done? How have they showed up? What have they said to you? How have they created an environment where you are just inspired by them? Right? That is what it means to be empowered. Your identity should be one that is embedded in empowerment. And empowerment isn't about dictating or having people follow you. I want to be really clear about that because oftentimes we liken impact with like direction or managing or telling people what to do. Empowerment is honestly like a state of being. When you are empowered, you permeate that again in the way that you speak, how you show up, how you dress, how you connect, how you lead, right? Empowerment is a state of being. And it's such a fundamental part of owning our identity because in those moments where people are challenging your identity, challenging who you are, the empowered being says, you're not going to shift me from my route. You're not going to take me off my pedestal. You're not going to derail me from what my purpose is. When you are empowered, you are affirmed and confirmed in who you are. And owning your identity, again, requires this second part, which is the empowerment piece. I found this statement that I want to share with you that I thought was so, I don't know, I thought it was so incredible. So it says that you cannot dilute yourself to be digestible. That one hit me. I'm going to say it again. You cannot dilute yourself to be more digestible. Because what that means is that you're not operating with authenticity. Now, that one really hit me because, again, as I think about what my journey has been in the last 10 years, in particular this last almost 6 years of running Me to Moi, I have realized in those moments prior to becoming an entrepreneur, the ways in which I diluted and dimmed myself to be digestible to people. Because I would hear things like, again, Aisha, you're a little bit much. You're loud. Maybe you need to tone down how you speak. Maybe you need to, maybe you need to not come off so confident or maybe not so assertive. Maybe you should change the way that you dress. I also heard that. Like maybe don't wear so much fitted clothing. I heard all of those things. And so what I did is I diluted myself in the name of being digestible by those who I thought I needed approval from. All it did was dishonor who I was. Remember, I said to you before that I could see in pictures, if I think about moments in that past, how I showed up, it was so far from being authentic. So be really careful, right? In the name of being digestible, what it is that you are sacrificing. And I can tell you right now that you're sacrificing your emotional, financial, mental, spiritual, physical well-being in the name of someone else's approval of you. But again, if they're operating with a limited mindset, they would never see you better than them regardless, right? So that line, I mean, if you hear nothing else in this podcast today, remember that, right? That you're not here to dilute yourself in the name of being digestible. You're actually here to maybe ruffle a little feathers. Okay. You're maybe here to create a little, remind people like who you are. So be really careful of that. And so for me, when we talk about empowerment, right, and we talk about what it means, again, to own our identity, again, there are kind of three key takeaways that I want to share with you. The first one is that your power actually lies in your uniqueness. Super cliche, like be yourself, but it's true. Be yourself. There is nobody out there like you. There might be things that are similar. Obviously, you connect with people because you have similarities, likeness, right? Whether it's birthday or personality or things you like or don't like. But who you are in your core is unique, and that is where your power exists. Okay? Your power exists in your uniqueness. And by being digestible, it means that you're just assimilating and letting go of what makes you unique. Don't do it. You hear me? I don't tell people what to do. As a coach, it is not my job to tell you what to do. Today, I'm on this platform telling you, don't do it because it doesn't serve you. It might serve the other person because they're uncomfortable with your greatness. They're uncomfortable with your power. They're uncomfortable with how you're showing up, your skills, your beauty, your talent, your gifts, whatever, all the things. Okay? Do not let go of that uniqueness. And if someone isn't comfortable with your uniqueness, then maybe they're not for you. The next one, which I think is in tandem or is in connection to what I just said, is the right people will find you. Listen, you can't be for everyone. You can't, because if you are, it means that you are shape-shifting. There is no way in this world that everybody's going to like me, right? People might be watching this podcast and be like, oh my God, I can't take it. I'm not for them. That's okay. I am for who I'm supposed to be for. And those people will find me or have already found me in my life. Right? But I also had to get to that place. I, again, at a point in my life, felt like I needed to be liked by everyone, that I needed everyone to approve who I was, that I needed to be for everyone. And all that happened is that I would confuse myself because I didn't know who I was. I knew who people wanted me to be. I knew how people wanted me to show up, but I didn't actually know who I was until I let that go. And you better believe that there were people who removed themselves from my life because again, I was no longer who they wanted me to be. I was who I was. But it means that they were never the right people for me regardless, right? The last one, or the last takeaway regarding empowerment, when it comes to owning our identity, is that it really is your magnet to success, right? Think about the things that you've succeeded in life to date, right? They haven't happened by luck. I know people say that like, oh my God, Aisha, you're so lucky. And listen, this is grunt work. I posted the other day online. It was like 11:30 at night. It was a Friday night, right? When people are relaxing and hanging out. And I was doing behind the scenes work for this podcast and, just getting social media ready. Like that's the grunt work. Success has not come like that. It has come with a commitment to wanting to be successful, right? And in that, it means that I am now a magnet because I'm putting that out there. I'm putting out the work because people are seeing it. They're like, you know what? I want to connect with you. It hasn't happened by accident by any means. It has happened by design. So when we are owning our identity, when we're showing up in a way that is unique, that is our being, then we now start to attract that kind of energy. You start to attract the right people. You start to attract, situations that you otherwise might not have found yourself in because now the universe is like, you know what? Yeah, man, like you're ready. It's time, right? So understand that, owning your identity isn't just about owning your identity. You need to think about all the things that are going to start to happen for you because again, it doesn't just show up in how you dress. It shows up in your mindset. It shows up in the way you think about yourself. It shows up in the way that you conduct yourself. Those are the things that people see. When you walk into a room with a level of confidence, people see that, right? When you speak to someone with purpose, with intent, even if you're not subject matter expert, you captivate people, right? Think about that. So these things don't just happen to you. They happen for you because of what you've put out there, right? Now, the last piece, which I said, taking empowered action isn't just about thinking and dreaming and hoping and sharing. No, it's actually putting verbs in your sentence where you are now being intentional and taking intentional steps to make things happen for you. And so when we talk about owning our identity, there is an action that must be done or actions that must take place in order to do that. And one of the first things is to really get clear and comfortable, which I know is a place of discomfort for many, to get comfortable about what those unique traits are, right? Like what makes you great? You should be able to say that with conviction. You should be able to say that with confidence. You should be able to say that with a level of comfort that people are like, oh yeah, like she knows who she is, right? You need to be able to assert who you are because that is owning your identity, right? Again, there's an action behind this. And a lot of times, as I said, when it comes to that, we think, oh my God, it's so selfish. Like I can't speak highly about myself. Why? Why can't you? You know, it's an exercise that I tell people to do a lot when I do coaching. I ask people to write a bio about themselves and like a bio that would be read out loud. If you were a keynote speaker, if you were getting an award, if you were whatever it is that, even if it's not related to your business, write your bio and then have somebody read it out to you and listen, right? Or even read it out loud to yourself. Right? Because a bio highlights your achievements, your greatness. Like when you read a bio, it needs to say all the stellar things about you, right? And how many times has someone asked you to write a bio and you're like, oh my God, what do I say? Like I'm uncomfortable talking about myself. I hear it all the time. That used to be me. Now I write a bio with a breeze, right? Why? Because I've embraced what I bring to the table. I've embraced who I am. I embrace that I have purpose and power and that I'm here to show up and take up space and hopefully empower and inspire others to do the same, right? But do that as an exercise. I want to challenge people. If you're watching this podcast and you find it a struggle to really speak highly of yourself and name what makes you unique and incredible and purposeful and powerful, write a bio. Write your bio and read it to yourself out loud. Allow yourself to hear the great things about yourself that you've achieved, that you've accomplished, you know, those kind of hidden whatever that is. Read it out loud. Get comfortable with owning your greatness because we set the tone. Again, this is another gem that I think I've shared in many episodes. We set the tone by which people engage with us. And if they see that we don't have high regard for ourselves, why are they going to have high regard for us? Right? So that's something that I want to challenge you all to do. Write your bio and read it out loud to yourself and then have an opportunity to be like, oh, I'm great. Again, great means not that you're better than somebody else. It just means that you are great in your own beautiful, curated space. Okay? The next thing around, again, an action when it comes to owning your identity is actually taking an action. Do something. Right? Maybe you've been hiding to do this social media post that speaks to something great that you achieved. Put it out there. Maybe you have received this promotion and you haven't told anyone because you feel like people are going to, feel a type of way. Oh, maybe you didn't deserve it. Put it out there. Like whatever it is. Our ability to own our identity means that we also have to take bold actions. I don't know if that was like episode 2 or 3 where I talked about that. Like audacity is also about just taking the first step. That stands true throughout, again, our desire to live with audacity, right? Get comfortable with taking even a baby step because we don't know if that baby step is the open door to something huge, right? The last one is do not or stop yourself from creating a shrinking mantra. What I mean by that is the mantra that says, I can't really show up and show out. Like I got to be demure. What is that? Be demure, be cutesy. I hate that. I really do. I get it. Like I get it's a TikTok fad, cute, but I actually hate it because I feel like it further perpetuates this mindset that like the ones that sit ladylike and quiet are the ones that are noticed. No. Now, again, I'm not telling you to kick open a door and be like, I'm here. I'm not saying that. But like, let yourself be known. Be present. Show up, right? Stand with purpose. Speak with purpose and intention. Let people know that you're here to take up space and there's a reason why, right? So stop that cringy, like shrinking mantra that says, I'm just going to sit in the corner quietly and hopefully someone will take notice. What they're going to take notice is that there's a quiet person in the corner. That's what they're going to take notice of. They're not going to think, oh, this quiet person in the corner actually has a gift that I really need to embrace or that I need to connect with. Okay? It doesn't pay to stay cutesy and demure. Again, find a happy medium. I'm not telling you to kick open doors and be aggressive and overwhelming. Like, don't do that, but be assertive. Okay? Understand that you have something to share and that other people desire to take what it is that you're sharing. Okay? That is a big lesson. Again, I was the one, what was it? That movie, Don't Put Baby in the Corner. You know that line? Don't put baby in the corner. Aisha's not in the corner. I used to be in the corner. I used to be the one that was sitting quietly, waiting for someone to pick me, or to ask me the question or to give me an opportunity. What did I tell you has happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. All they thought was I was cute and quiet. I'm not. I am far from cute and quiet. But it took me a while to understand that I needed to show up, right? That if I was going to if I was going to talk about what it meant to own my identity, that I also needed to engage in actions and do things where I owned my identity, right? So again, these are not, everything that I share is never a perfect science. Like there's ups and downs and highs and lows and things will work for some and things will not work for others. That's fine. But what I'm reminding you is that the owning of our identity, understanding who we are, our gifts, what we bring to the table is, again, another fundamental aspect of living with audacity. And beyond that, it actually requires us to do something. So don't just sit with the thought. Don't just sit with the desire. Don't just sit with the hope that things are going to be different. No, you actually got to put in that work, right? You actually have to do something. And so really, one of the things, again, as I kind of bring this to a close and wrap it up and hopefully you've been inspired. I hope that when you watch this podcast, you leave even a millimeter better than how you started. Because my whole purpose, as I said, is to share gems, to share insights, but beyond that, to empower you to understand that who exists within you, this prominent, dominant, purposeful, powerful person exists and deserves to be out there. And while society, narratives, structures will try to say otherwise, it is for you to acknowledge that they exist, but it is for you to also create your own path, right? No one is going to create your path for you. You actually have to do that yourself, right? And so one thing, as I said, is being mindful of the pressure to conform and really make sure, that we're not allowing these narratives to press us down. We have to acknowledge them. We know we have to coexist in this world where there are systems and structures and norms and labels and all those things, but it doesn't mean that you need to put yourself in this box, right? You need to be outside of that box, first and foremost. The next one is understanding, again, the power of owning our identity isn't just about being able to say it. It's about showing up in that state, right? Again, how you speak, how you talk, how you put yourself out there. All of those things are part of owning your identity and living this audacious life. And the last one is a really important one, is breaking free from judgment. Whether it is judgment externally, listen, people are going to judge. They're going to judge whether it's good. They're going to judge whether it's bad. People will always have something to say. It is just the world in which we live in, right? But we have to break free from that, because that's where, again, we start to dilute in the name of being digestible, right? I'm going to keep saying that. Dilute, do not dilute in the name of being digestible. We really have to work hard to break free from judgment, understanding that judgment exists, but that can't be what holds us back, right? And also being mindful around how we will self-judge, right? We will tell ourselves things about ourselves that are not kind, right? So also be mindful of that mantra and that mindset. Again, this owning of identity, living with audacity, isn't just a state of being, it is a mindset. So you can show up, but if your mindset is still telling you, oh my God, you're supposed to be shrinking yourself, they don't match, right? You can't fake that, right? So be careful again of what you're saying to yourself about yourself, because that is, again, a strong connection to also owning your identity, right? That narrative that you tell yourself about yourself. And so I'm going to challenge you. I know I have one challenge, but I'm giving you a second challenge. And the second challenge, so remember, the first challenge is for you to write your own bio, like a proper bio that speaks to your greatness, and then read it out loud, or maybe have someone in your life read it to you. And the second challenge that I want to offer you is write 10 things that make you unique. I know this sounds super maybe childlike, but you'd be surprised the struggle that people have to write 10 great things about them, even though there's 50 great things about them, right? Your ability to own your identity requires comfort. Do you hear me say this? It requires comfort in identifying and saying what makes you great. Yeah, there's shadows. Of course, there's things that we need to work on. No one's perfect. That doesn't exist. Perfection does not exist. I have many shadows, but there's many things that I'm great at, that I'm comfortable articulating, right? So that's the second challenge. I want you to write at minimum 10 things that make you great. You can share it in my DMs. You don't even need to share it, but just do it. Or you can say, Aisha, I wrote 10 things about myself and it feels really good, right? Even that, you don't need to necessarily post it, but let me know if it's something that you did, right? When we think about owning our identity, again, we got to be careful about those labels. How are we allowing ourselves to find ourselves in these boxes? And are we? And if we are, why? And if we recognize why, then how do we get ourselves out of that? We want to also understand that authenticity attracts alignment. Nothing great that happens to you happens by accident. It happens because you are creating the path of which great things are going to come to you. So the people, when they see you and you're out here doing great, they're like, oh my God, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. Let them know, no. This is not luck. My authenticity has created alignment, which is why these things are coming to me. Nothing by accident. Everything is by design. Okay? What you put out is what you receive. Another one is your uniqueness is your power. Remember that. You don't want to be like everybody else. Like there's enough other people out there. Be yourself. Be your unique self. That's where your power exists. Yes, again, there's similar traits, similar behaviors, things that we have in common, but there is something unique about everyone. That is your power source. You might still be trying to figure it out. That's cool. But understand that being unique is the lane that you want to be in and not just being like everybody else. Because you get lost, as my best friend always says, you get lost in the sauce. Okay? You want to be unique. The last one is living boldly. As we know, as I have said episode after episode after episode, living with audacity requires action. Put verbs in your sentence. Right? It's great to dream. It's great to desire. It's great to think. It's great to aspire to. What are you doing? What verb is going into your sentence to turn a desire into an output? Okay? Remember that. To live with audacity, to own your identity, anything that we're doing in this space requires you to do something. So take bold action. And remember, bold action doesn't need to be huge. It could be just that one thing that you've been sitting on for a little bit, that you've been hesitating, that you're now willing to do. Okay, so take bold action, right? When we're living with audacity, this is the gem drop that I drop every week. When you're living with audacity, again, it's not about perfection. Perfection does not exist. Living with audacity means that you're committed to your purpose, you're committed to your power, you're committed to growing, to evolving, to learning, to undoing, to unlearning, to bringing back new things. That is what it means to live with audacity. That you are prepared to take bold action in every step of your life to get better, to elevate. Simple. Is it easy? No. But is it simple? It is. And sometimes it's just reframing the belief that we can't be these things and understand that we actually already are, right? We actually already are. We just need to unpack and unlearn limited mindsets, behaviors, being mindful around how we're letting external narratives and assumptions kind of dim our light. Remember, being more diluting in the name of digestion. and instead just showing up as our authentic self and being willing to take bold action and unpack and uncover who we really are. It's a journey. It continues to be a journey, right? Whatever I've learned this year, I will just add to my toolbox that has been growing and elevating and expanding, and wait for the next lesson to be learned. But I'm so committed to living with audacity that for me, every opportunity, whether good or challenging, because remember, there's bad situations, but in self-discovery, there are challenging moments is where you learn the most about yourself, okay? So get comfortable with owning your identity. There's only one you. There's only one you, and there should only be one you. And again, we just want to make sure, or I want to make sure, my job as your podcast, I want to say podcast and coach at the same time, which is why it came out that way. As your podcasting, lead, as your coach, I want to continue to remind you that authenticity is the greatest gift you can give yourself. It is the greatest gift that you can give yourself. And yes, is it difficult? Absolutely, because not every space desires our authentic self. But I'm going to tell you, then that's the place I don't need to be. Remember, we're not for everyone. Not every space is for us, but we also have the ability and the power to create our own space. Assured and confirmed and affirmed in who we are, then owning our identity is just one more achievement in our toolbox of things that make us great, right? So as we bring this podcast to a close, this episode to a close, you have two challenges. I'm going to remind you what they are. Number one, I want you to write a bio about yourself. And not a little meek bio, like a bio that speaks to the things that you've achieved over the longevity of your life. Okay, speak highly of yourself as though someone was going to read it on a stage and read it back to yourself. And also write 10 great things about you. Keep it posted somewhere on those days where you're feeling a little low or feeling like, I don't really know if I'm going down the right path or whatever it looks like. Keep that list, okay? If we aren't able to speak highly of ourselves, about ourselves, it makes it really difficult for others to do the same. Okay, we set the conditions by which people treat us and engage with us, and you better believe that you need to let them know you're starting at a 10, not at a 1. Okay, that's my challenge for you. When you finish watching this show, I need you to let me know how this challenge was. Was it difficult? Did you love it? Is it something you've done before? Is it something you haven't done? Let me know. Let your girl know. Okay, I'm always here. As always, I want to thank you for joining me with another episode of Living with Audacity. I'm your host, Aisha. Have a great week, everyone.